The derelict station tumbled through the void like a dying beetle, its solar panels shattered and hull breached in a dozen places. Marcus Reed maneuvered his salvage vessel Wandering Star closer, his practiced eye scanning for anything worth the fuel he'd burned getting here. The station had been abandoned for weeks, according to the deep space buoys. Plenty of time for anything valuable to be stripped by other scavengers. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. And something about this floating wreck called to him. His fingers danced across the control panel, engaging the docking clamps with a satisfying thunk that reverberated through the ship's hull. Marcus stood, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness from 6 hours in the pilot's seat. At 32, he was lean and weather-worn, his dark hair perpetually unkempt, and his jaw shadowed with stubble that never quite became a beard. The tattoo on his forearm, a compass rose with coordinates to Earth, was a reminder of a home he'd left 15 years ago and never looked back. He pulled on his environment suit, checking seals twice before cycling through the airlock. The station's interior was a nightmare of twisted metal and floating debris. His helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls scorched by fire and corridors choked with wreckage. Whatever had happened here, it had been catastrophic, and sudden. Marcus made his way deeper into the station, his magnetic boots clicking against the decking with each step. Most valuable equipment had already been gutted, just as he'd suspected. He was about to turn back when movement in his peripheral vision froze him in place. There, in the corner of what had once been a living quarters section, something shifted among the shadows. Marcus's hand dropped instinctively to the plasma cutter at his belt. Not quite a weapon, but effective enough in a pinch. He approached slowly, every sense on high alert. As his lights swept across the space, he saw her. She was curled into an impossibly small ball, wedged between two collapsed storage units. Her skin was a pale silvery blue that seemed to drink in his helmet lights rather than reflect them. Long, translucent hair floated around her head like seaweed in a gentle current. But what struck him most were her eyes, large and opalescent, filled with a terror so profound it made his chest ache. She was Cytherian, he realized, one of the crystalline species from the outer reaches. And she was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager. Her clothing was torn and stained, and even in the low light, he could see the dark patches of bruising across her exposed arms and face. "Hey," Marcus said softly, raising his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched at his voice, pressing herself harder against the wall. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Marcus noticed in the way she clutched at her chest, where Cytherian's bioluminescent organs typically glowed with health. Hers were dark, almost black beneath her translucent skin. Understanding crashed over him. Among Cytherians, those bioluminescent organs weren't just biological features. They were status symbols, indicators of health, desirability, and social standing. A Cytherian without that inner light was considered defective, worthless. Families had been known to abandon such children rather than bear the shame of raising them. "They left you here," he said, not really a question. The evidence was all around them in the hasty evacuation, in the single figure left behind. Her eyes welled with something that might have been tears. Though Cytherian physiology was different enough that he couldn't be sure. She nodded once, a jerky, defeated movement. Marcus felt anger kindle in his gut, hot and fierce. He'd seen enough cruelty in his years navigating the frontier, enough casual disregard for life that should have numbed him to it by now. But something about this girl, abandoned and afraid in the dark, refusing to give up even as her air supply dwindled, sparked something protective in him that he'd thought long buried. "All right. Listen," he said, moving closer, but keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "My name is Marcus. I have a ship docked here, and it has air, food, heat, everything you need. I'm offering you a way off this wreck. No strings, no debts. Just one person helping another. What do you say? She stared at him for a long moment, her opalescent eyes searching his face as if trying to read the truth of his intentions. Finally, she whispered in heavily accented standard, "Why? I am nothing. Broken." "You're not nothing," Marcus said firmly. "You're a person who deserves better than this. And yeah, I'm just a salvager who talks to his ship computer too much and hasn't seen the inside of a proper station in 6 months. But I know right from wrong. This," he gestured at the derelict station around them, "is wrong." Something shifted in her expression, a fragile hope looming amid the despair. She reached out with a trembling hand, and Marcus took it carefully, shocked by how cold her skin felt even through his glove. "Nessa," she said quietly. "My name is Nessa. Nice to meet you, Nessa." Marcus helped her to her feet, noting how she swayed with weakness. "Let's get you somewhere safe." As they made their way back through the wreckage toward his ship, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. He'd spent 15 years drifting through space, taking odd jobs and avoiding attachments. But something about the weight of Nessa's hand in his, the trust she was placing in a complete stranger because she had no other choice, made him want to be worthy of that trust. The wandering star was small, just a converted cargo hauler with minimal crew quarters. But it was clean and warm, and most importantly, had functioning life support. Marcus helped Nessa through the airlock and immediately guided her to the small medical bay. It wasn't much, just an automated diagnostic bed and some basic supplies. But it would have to do as Nessa collapsed onto the med bed. Marcus began cycling through the ship's medical database, trying to find information on Cepharian physiology. The computer's synthesized voice droned through the basics: crystalline-based biology, photosynthetic elements in their cellular structure, complex bioluminescent organs that serve multiple functions, including communication, temperature regulation, and social signaling. "The damaged organs?" Marcus asked, glancing at where Nessa lay with her eyes closed. Exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Can they heal?" Nessa's eyes opened slowly. "No, damage is permanent. I will always be dark." Her voice carried a weight of resignation that made his heart clench. Marcus pulled up a chair beside the med bed. "Your family, they couldn't accept that?" A bitter smile crossed her lips. "Cepharian society values light above all. We are called the children of stars. Those born without light, or who lose it, are called void-touched. Cursed. My light failed 2 cycles ago after an accident in the crystal mines. My family tried to hide it, but eventually the shame became too great." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They told me we were evacuating to a new colony. When I woke from sleep stasis, I was alone." The casual cruelty of it staggered him. Marcus had grown up on the rough edges of human space, had seen his share of hardship and injustice. But to abandon your own child to death by exposure because of something beyond their control, that was a level of cold-blooded that made his blood boil. "Well, you're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "You're safe here for as long as you need." Nessa's eyes searched his face, confusion evident. "But why? You gain nothing from this." "I am burdened now." Marcus leaned forward, holding her gaze. "Where I come from, we've got this saying: you judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable. Your people failed that test spectacularly. But I'm not them, and you're not a burden. You're a survivor." Something in his words seemed to crack the shell of despair surrounding her. Tears, actual tears, began sliding down her cheeks, leaving faint luminescent trails on her silvery skin. Marcus reached out instinctively, wiping them away with his thumb, surprised by the warmth they carried. "Thank you," Nessa whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you, Marcus." As she finally surrendered to exhausted sleep, Marcus sat back in his chair, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. He should probably contact the nearest station, report finding an abandoned miner, let the proper authorities handle it. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But something told him that official channels would just send Nessa back to her people, back to a culture that had already decided she was worthless. And Marcus Reed had never been particularly good at doing the smart, safe thing. "Computer," he said quietly, "plot a course for the Meridian sector. We're going off-grid for a while." As the ship's engines hummed to life and the derelict station fell away behind them, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Maybe he'd been drifting too long. Maybe he needed something to anchor him to the living universe again. Maybe saving this girl would save him too. The wandering star hummed through the empty reaches between systems, far from the shipping lanes and patrol roads that crisscrossed civilized space. Marcus had learned long ago that the best place to disappear was in the vast nothing between stars, where scanner coverage was spotty and questions were few. 3 days had passed since he'd found Nessa on that dying station. 3 days of watching her slowly come back to life. She sat now in the small galley, wrapped in one of his oversized thermal jackets, her fingers curled around a mug of heated nutrient broth. The dark hollows under her eyes had begun to fade, and some color had returned to her silvery blue skin. Her translucent hair, now clean and brushed, caught the light from the overhead panels in shimmering waves. "You don't have to keep staring," she said without looking up, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I am not going to disappear." Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. He'd been caught watching her again, something he found himself doing with increasing frequency. "Sorry. Just making sure you're all right." Better than all right. She finally met his eyes, and he was struck again by how expressive they were. Those large opalescent orbs that seemed to shift color with her moods. Right now they held warmth, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite name. First real food in weeks. First safety in longer. He settled into the seat across from her, nursing his own mug of coffee, genuine earth-grown beans he'd been hoarding for months. Want to talk about it? What happened before? Nessa's fingers tightened on her mug. For a moment he thought she'd retreat into silence, but then she began speaking, her voice soft but steady. "My family operated Crystal 9 on Scytha Prime's third moon. Dangerous work, but profitable. I was good at it, fast, precise. Then one day, structural collapse. Massive crystal formation fell, pinned me for hours before rescue." She touched her chest where her bioluminescent organs lay dark beneath her skin. Damage was catastrophic. The light that defines us, that connects us to our star heritage, it simply went out. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, meaning it. She shook her head. At first, family tried everything. Healers, technology, even old religious ceremonies. Nothing worked. And slowly, I watched how they looked at me change. First pity, then discomfort, then shame. Her voice hardened. My younger sister Vela stopped speaking to me. Said my presence dimmed her own light. My parents began hiding me when visitors came. And finally, they decided the kindest thing was to let me go. "Kindest," Marcus repeated, anger simmering in his chest. They dressed up murder as mercy. "Perhaps they believed it," Nessa said quietly. "In Cytherian culture, light is life. Without it, what am I? Dead already, just walking corpse that doesn't know enough to lie down. That's garbage." The words came out sharper than he intended. "You're alive, breathing, thinking, feeling. That's what matters. Not some biological quirk that society decided to build a hierarchy around." Nessa looked at him with something like wonder. Humans see things so differently. Maybe, or maybe we've just made enough mistakes in our own history to recognize stupidity when we see it. Marcus set down his mug and leaned forward. Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand your culture completely, but I know that any society that throws away people like you is broken, not the other way around. A smile, genuine and unguarded, loomed across her face. It transformed her, made her radiant despite the dark organs beneath her skin. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. You are a strange man, Marcus Reed, she said. Strange and kind. Over the following days, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. Marcus taught Nessa the basics of ship operations, showing her how to read navigation charts and monitor the engine's health. She proved to be a quick study, her fingers dancing across the control panels with natural grace. In return, she told him stories of Cytherian culture, the beautiful parts that her people had built around their unique biology, how they could communicate in pulses of light when words failed, how their cities were grown from living crystal that responded to their presence, how their art was created by groups of Cytherians, combining their luminescence into symphonies of color and pattern. Sounds beautiful, Marcus said one evening as they sat in the small observation deck, watching stars stream past. It was. Nessa's voice carried wistfulness. But beauty built on exclusion is poisoned beauty. I see that now. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching. Marcus found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle warmth radiating from her body. The way she smelled like ozone and something sweeter, almost like vanilla. Marcus, she said suddenly, her voice uncertain. May I try something? Sure, he replied, curious. Nessa shifted to face him fully, then reached out and placed both hands on either side of his face. Her palms were warm against his skin, and he felt a subtle tingling where she touched him. Her eyes closed in concentration. What are you doing? He asked softly. Among my people, we share emotions through light, she explained, her eyes still closed. Is intimate act reserved for family and lovers. But I cannot create light anymore. She paused, frustration evident in her features. I am trying to feel you anyway, without the light. To understand what you feel. Marcus held still, hardly daring to breathe. The tingling sensation spread from where her hands touched his face, creeping down his neck and across his shoulders. It wasn't unpleasant, more like electricity without the shock, a gentle current passing between them. Nessa's eyes opened suddenly, wide with surprise. I can feel something. Not like before, but different. Your emotions are so strong, so warm. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You care for me? Of course I do, Marcus said, his heart hammering. You've been through hell. Anyone would know. She shook her head slightly, her hands still cradling his face. Is more than compassion. I feel it. Something deeper. He couldn't deny it, not with her looking at him like that, not with the truth of his feelings apparently written in whatever strange connection had formed between them. Yeah, he admitted. I guess it is. Nessa's expression softened into something vulnerable and hopeful. In my culture, I am untouchable now. No one would ever choose me for bonding, for family, for love. I thought those parts of my life were over before they even began. Your culture is wrong, Marcus said firmly. He reached up and covered her hands with his own. You're not untouchable. You're not broken. You're just you. And that's more than enough. The space between them seemed to contract. Nessa leaned forward slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. But Marcus didn't move, didn't want to move. When her lips met his, it was like nothing he'd ever experienced. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. But that strange tingling sensation intensified, spreading through his entire body like warm honey. He felt her emotions as if they were his own. The desperate hope, the fear of rejection, the dawning joy that he wasn't pulling away. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nessa's eyes were bright with wonder. "I felt you," she gasped. "Truly felt you. Not through light, but through something else. Something new." Marcus touched his lips, still tingling from the contact. "What was that?" "I do not know." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "But my people say that true bonding transcends light, that it is connection of souls rather than biology. I thought it was just poetry, beautiful lie to comfort void-touched like me. But maybe?" She trailed off, hope and fear warring in her expression. "Maybe it's real," Marcus finished for her. They sat together in the observation deck long into the ship's night cycle, talking and sometimes not talking, just existing in each other's presence. Marcus learned that Nessa loved mathematics, that she could calculate complex equations in her head with ease, that she dreamed of becoming a crystal architect, designing the living structures her people inhabited, that her favorite food was a type of mineral-based confection that sparkled like snow. Nessa learned that Marcus had left Earth after his parents died in a colony accident, that he'd bounced between ships and stations for years before buying the Wandering Star with money from a particularly lucrative salvage job, that he loved old Earth music, especially something called jazz, that he'd been alone by choice for so long, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to want someone around. What do we do now? Nessa asked as artificial dawn began lighting the observation deck. We cannot hide in space forever. Marcus had been thinking about that very question. There are places on the frontier where questions aren't asked. Small colonies, independent stations. We could find somewhere you'd be safe, where your past doesn't matter. We? She looked at him with those expressive eyes. If you want, he said, suddenly uncertain. I mean, you don't have to stay with me. I could set you up somewhere safe, and... She pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. I want to stay with you, Marcus Reed, if you will have me. Relief and something warmer flooded through him. Yeah, he said, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. I'll have you. But even as they made plans, Marcus couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The universe had a way of not letting people simply disappear, especially when there were others who might object to that disappearance. His instincts, honed by years of surviving on the frontier, whispered that their time of peace was running out. As if in answer, the ship's proximity alarm began to wail, harsh and insistent. Marcus bolted from the observation deck to the cockpit. Nessa closed behind him. The scanner showed 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace behind them, their signatures matching the configuration of Cytherian patrol vessels. No, Nessa whispered, fear stark in her voice. They found us. Marcus's hands flew across the controls, calculating vectors and jump coordinates. The Wandering Star was fast, but not fast enough to outrun military vessels. Hold on, he said grimly. This is about to get interesting. As the pursuing ships closed in, and a hailing frequency crackled to life, Marcus made a decision. Whatever happened next, whoever was coming for them, he wasn't giving Nessa up without a fight. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth everything.